With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sanhedrin Daf Samach Aleph. We began on Daf Samach Hamid Beis, the Mishnah, telling us regarding details of the grave sin of idol worship. And as we learned in our sugya, that we have really two psukim. We have a pasuk in Mishpatim, Zoiveyach lo Elohim Yacharam, from where we learn that when it comes to any avodah that is used in the Beis Hamikdash, slaughtering, but not only slaughtering, burning, pouring, which has in it included zrikas hadam, these avodas, and the Mishnah added also bowing down, if someone does that to a idol, God forbid, they're going to be chayiv skila, whether that is the usual way in which that idol is worshipped or not. That's called, even if this is shaloi kedarka, you're going to be chayiv skila. Truth be told, bowing down in the Beis Hamikdash is not a bona fide avodah. There were times that you needed to bow down. When Bikurim was brought, people bowed down in the Beis Hamikdash. When we heard the Shem HaMefoidesh uttered, Mipi Kohen Gadol, we would bow down. But it's not part of the avodah. Nevertheless, there is another pasuk that speaks about Hishtachava, all right? Vayeloch vayavoid Elohim acherim vayishtachu lahem, and the Torah right afterwards says V'hitzei sasei ishahu for skila. So B'kitzur we have Zvicha and we have Hishtachava. And what the Braisa taught us is Zvicha tells us regarding all of the avodos that are done in the Pnim, that even if it's Shaloi Kedarka, you're going to be Chayiv Skila if it's used for an avodah zarah. Hishtachava is the only exception. Hishtachava is a respectful gesture. If God forbid it's made for an idol, there also, if it's not, even though it's not the kedarka, you will be chayav misa. But other than hishtachava, any other action that's done for an idol, if it's shaloi kedarka, like the Mishnah spoke out, you're going to be chayav alav, but you will not be chayav skila. And this is more or less, we're going to start again on Daf Samach Hamid Beis, that Rava bar Rav Chanan asked to Abaya, why don't we say that Hishtachava should be the model? That even an avodah that's not done in the Pnim, which would include many other gestures or services, should be something that if it's done at least that are covered like Hishtachava, you should be Chayiv Skila. And basically, if that would be the case, the Gemara answer is, then the pasuk in Mishpatim Zoiveyach lo Elohim Yacharam is superfluous, it's not needed. We must say that Zoiveyach is the model that teaches for all else, and Zoiveyach is unique that it's taka only Avodas Panim, and therefore if it's not Avodas Panim, you're not going to be chayiv, with the only exception of Hishtachava. Now we're going to have on Daf Samach Aleph some laws regarding a mesis. In other words, you have in Parshas Re'eh the specific, the detailed scenario where you have an instigator, the mesis, and you have the nisas, the one or the ones who are listening, God forbid, to the instigator concerning an avodah zarah, concerning worshiping avodah zarah. They're both going to be chayav misa. We're ultimately going to point out, and that will be the bulk of Daf Samach Aleph, that there is an apparent stira between our Mishnah and Daf Samach Hamid Beis, from where it's mashma that the chiyuv of misa, of worshiping avodah zarah, God forbid, is only when you actually worship. And in a Mishnah, Daf Samach Zayin Hamid Beis, it's going to be mashma. It's actually clear that even if someone only says, I'm going to, God forbid, go and worship idols, for that declaration, that in itself brings about the chiyuv misa. So is it the service or is it the declaration? And we're going to link it to a scenario where the person responded, I'm going to go worship, a response to someone who's instigating. So there's the mesis, there's the nisas, there's going to be various ways of reconciling this apparent contradiction, and with the ultimate, the end will be that it's b'chlal marastira, it's zu af zu, as we'll speak out when we learn the sugya. And Daf Samach Aleph, Amid Beis in the bottom, we're going to open up a big new topic. Here are the words. The topic is ha'ovid avodas kechavim ma'ahava oy meyira. Whether the b'chlal chayiv misa or not, whether the chayiv or pater, pater means they're not even going to get another punishment. Abaya says chayiv, Rava says pater. There are so many different ways of understanding this inquiry. We're going to learn our sugya, Kishitas Rashi and others, that me'ava or me'yira means if someone worships an idol, not because they believe that there is some divinity in that thing, but because they love another person. So out of love for another person, they're worshiping the idol. or out of fear of another person, they're worshiping the idol, with all of the details that we'll speak out. It's not fear of getting killed. Fear of getting killed, that Rambam paskins that even though Avodah Zarah is one of the three big ones for which a person should go al Kiddush Hashem, but if one didn't, then you're going to be pater. If someone's fear is not of death, it's fear of getting hurt, fear of financial loss. That in itself, L'Shitas Rava, will also bring about an exemption, and we're going to have a lot of challenges on Abaya and on Rava, and as we're going to unpackage, we'll see how far we can get. We're going to learn about the unique Karban Chatos that a Kohen Moshuach brings. B'chlal in Chumash Vayikra, when it comes to a Karban Chatos, the Torah differentiates between the Nasi and between the Kohen Moshuach Molchama that we're speaking about. Now, the Kohen Moshuach means not Moshuach Molchama. The Kohen Gadol, the Kohen that became a Kohen Gadol because he was anointed, which is the way a Kohen Gadol became a Kohen Gadol up until when the Shaman HaMishcha was hid by Yoshia HaMelech, like we keep on learning, Be'erech 35 years before the Churban Bayis Rishon. Now, what's interesting regarding the unique chatos that a Kohen Moshuach has to bring, that normally he only has to bring a Karban Chatos, not for him doing an act that inadvertently is a sin, but by him being a big scholar, and by him erroneously paskening wrong, and then he follows through his psak din, which is really the core topic of Masechtas Hodeis. In other words, the unique Karban is only if he did it because he came to a wrong halachic decision. When it comes to a detailed sin of Avodah Zarah, there's a machlokes Tanoim. Whether this unique Karban of the Kohen Moshuach only comes about if he makes a erroneous ruling, or Rebbe holds by Avodah Zarah, we don't say that. We say that if he, like any other Yid, Pashat Shigagas Maisa, if they erroneously do something that you may not do, they're also, since he's a Kohen Gadol, he brings a different type of Karban Chatos, and we're going to learn many nuances regarding what does idol worship mean, especially when it comes to bowing down, when it comes to this Ava and Yira. If a person bows down and they don't even know they're bowing down to an idol. If a person is bowing down to an idol, but in their mind, they're not bowing down to Avodah Zarah. And many other such nuances which are amazing. Some scenarios, the person is going to be a bona fide Oved Avodah Zarah. In some cases, a person b'chlal won't be a idol worshiper. So let's just go back to Chap to Flow, again to Daf Samach Amid Beis, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. So again, we have a pasuk by Zvicha, we have a pasuk by Yishtachava, and Chazal is telling us that the pasuk of Zvicha is the teacher, is the model. And only Avodas Pnim, which is Zvicha, which is Haktara, which is Nisuch, which includes, as we learned yesterday, Zrikas Hadam, those are the Avodas for which, if anyone does them, God forbid, for an idol, even if it is Shaloi Kedarka, they're going to be Chayiv Skila. Hishtachava, bowing down on the Beis HaMikdash, wasn't a bona fide Avodah, that's the only exception. That if a person bows down to an idol, even if that's not the way the Goyim worship the idol, they're going to be Chayiv Skila. But Ishtachava is not a model to any other respectful worship to an idol. So if a person, like the Mishnah says, embraces an idol or kisses an idol, if that's not the way the Goyim worship it, then the person won't be Chayiv Skila. Chayiv Lav, but not Chayiv Skila. And the question is, why? You have a pasuk of Zevicha, you have a pasuk by Ishtachava. Why don't we say that Yotzei Ishtachava l'lamed ala klal kulei? Let Ishtachava be the model to tell us that any respectful act of service to an idol, even if that's Shaloi Kedarka, even if that's not the way that idol is normally worshipped, is also going to be a violation for which you're going to be Chayiv Misa, Chayiv Skila. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Rav is saying to himself, and if you're going to counter if that would be the case, then who needs the whole pasuk and mishpatim? Zoiveach lolohim yacharam. Zevicha is also a respectful act. Slaughtering an animal for an idol, it should be included in Ishtachava. So to Rav, to build up his question, he says, no. I'll tell you legufei. Again, we learned this yesterday. Regarding which scenario, to tell you the machashvin ma'avodah la'avodah. That if a person did one action, and that action was not for idol worship, but during that action they had in mind that the subsequent action will be done for idol worship, Are they going to be chayiv misa? Maybe the Zoveach is going to tell you that yes, they'll be chayiv misa. As we learned the Itmar, now guys, this machlikas hamiroyim is not focused on whether you're chayiv misa or not, but it's focused on another din shleima, which is that an animal daf samach in the bottom, samach hamabes in the bottom, that an animal that was worshipped as an idol becomes asur bahano. So what happens if someone shechted an animal? The act of shechita was not l'shem avodah zarah. But while they were slaughtering it, they had in mind that when I'm going to sprinkle the blood, that will be lavedes kichav. Or while they shechted it, it was stam, it was not l'shem avodah zarah, but they had in mind lahaktir chel b'lavedes kichav, or any other subsequent action. Machlekes Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, the animal becomes asur. And as we spoke about yesterday, we learned that from pigul. Just like a thought of pigul, of some other, of chutz lizman, is going to disqualify the animal in the Beis HaMikdash. Even if, when the kohen shechted it, he had in mind, not regarding shechita, he had in mind, the hoylacha will be chutz lizman, or the kabbalah will be chutz lizman, or the zrika. It's bona fide pigul. So here also, machash v'en lavoid lavoida. Reish Lakish says, don't compare it to pigul. And now the Gemara clarifies. So according to Rabbi Yechanan, I would already know machash v'en lavoida lavoida. Just like Rabbi Yechanan says that the animal is asur bahana, that's the havamina now. Therefore, because of pigul, we would know on our own from pigul that you're going to be chayiv misa when you're machashvin ma'avoida la'avoida. So therefore, the zeveach would be superfluous. So therefore, you must use zeveach as the model and the hishtachava as the exception. So my kasha is not according to Rabbi Yechanan, but according to Reish Lakish, I can argue that the pasuk is needed. Since Reish Lakish holds the animal is not asur bahana, nevertheless, Zeveach lo Elohim Yachram is telling you the animal is taken not asur bahana, but the one who did it is chayav misa. And if that's the case, that's the kasha. So why don't we therefore say that hishtachava should be the model? Now the Gemara is going to answer by taking a step back and by saying neither statement that you made I accept. Not it's correct to say that according to Rabbi Yechanan there's no kasha, nor is it correct to say that according to Reish Lakish there is a kasha. Be'emes, lokula alma, we don't need zoveach for this. And therefore, since zoveach would be extra, it must be used as the model. So the Gemara says, Maskav l'Rav Papa, that's where we left off yesterday. What do I mean? Ul Rabbi Yechanan lo'boy yakra. You can't tell me that just because Rabbi Yechanan holds that mechashvin ma'avoida la'avoida makes the animal asur bahana, it doesn't mean automatically that without a pasuk, the one who did it is chayav misa. Because I can counter argue, Rabbi Yechanan was focused on the animal. Aval gavra, maybe, loy bar katolahu. And therefore, the kasha is really even according to Rabbi Yechanan. V'asakra, therefore I can argue that you needed the zeveach l'Elohim to tell you that even the gavra is chayiv misa. Furthermore, another step. Be'emes, so first of all, the kasha of Rava is even according to Rabbi Yechanan. Eloma, the same answer you'll give to Rabbi Yechanan will be according to Reish Lakish. It's not correct. The zeveach is extra. The zeveach is extra. That even l'Reish Lakish, mi boy yakra, if zeveach is not the model to tell you that only if someone does avodas panim shaloi kedarka, you're going to be chayiv. If we're not going to say that zeveach will be extra, why? Because at kan loy koshari Reish Lakish ela behema. Don't entangle, don't connect the status of the animal with the sin of the one who did it. And as we spoke at Bekitza yesterday, that there are other scenarios where someone does an act of avodah zarah worship, even when they don't asid the chefza, but they are oved avodah zarah. So even l'Reish Lakish that holds that the animal remains mutar bahana, logically, the one who did it, even though it was ma'avoida la'avoida, will be chayav misa. Why is that? That at kan like kosher Reish Lakish ela behema, but gavra logically bar kartolo who should be chayiv misa. And where do I see that? Mida dahava amishtach v'lahar. If someone bows down to something that's affixed, and the halacha is the har remains permitted. If not all of the mountains and the hills, you're kidding, the Canaanites and all the other pagans that lived in the Holy Land before God gave it to us, they worshipped everything there. Everything is mutar bana. Nevertheless, v'oivda b'sayif. Guys, just to make it clear, sayif, beheading, that's for a goy. A ben noyach, like we learned in the previous sugya, Ben Noach is chayiv one type of death for any violation of his mitzvahs or her mitzvahs. Saif. That's referring a yid for avodah zarah skila. And what's the logic is that since the only way to sprinkle the blood, for example, is by shechting it. So if someone shechts an animal, not l'shem avodah zarah, but in order to sprinkle the blood to avodah zarah, for sure that shechita should be considered logically an act of idol worship. And you don't need the zeveach l'Elohim for that. And therefore, because of that pasuk being extra, because of that, muzman zagin, zeveach is the model, and ishtachava is the exception. Well, we're going to have something which happens quite often, is that even though we came to that conclusion, the Gemara is going to spend a lot of time challenging the Havamina. Aside of this reason that zeveach is extra, if not for that, kum t'chais, Rava bar Chanan, right? Rava bar Rav Chanan was saying that ishtachava should be the model. The Gemara is going to say, how can he even think that because of X, Y, and Z, as we'll see in a moment. Just a side question,
the animal will be also banur for sure.
Animals, if you're not pigul, if he had in mind during shechita that he's going to do something later for avodah zarah, that's a machlokes. But independent, logically, l'kula alma, without a pasuk, the oived is chayiv. If he's a yid, chayiv skila. However, we are samach aleph, 10 lines from the top of the amid. This flow is important to chap. So amalei Rav Acham diftel Ravina, and he's making it clear that his question is not on the maskana; it's only on the havamina. You see how strong do we say that a havamina and Torah is Torah? That the Gemara is going to spend a lot of time just trying to figure out what was even his havamina. Lamai de ka'amalei Rava bar Rav Chanan la'abaya. That what? What did he say? That maybe ema yotze hishtachava l'lamed al kol kol. Maybe hishtachava should be the model. That any act that's respectful to an idol, even if it's shaloi kedarka, should bring about chi of skila. How can he say that? Why not? So Chevron, let's introduce other psukim in the Torah that speak about idol worship. This is a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh. And the pasuk there reads, Upentidroish leloihehem, leimoid. We're going to go into the Holy Land, and we're going to inquire regarding their gods with a little g. Eicha yavdu hagoyim ha'ela es eloihehem. And God forbid, the eser kain gamani, says the pasuk. So that's the pasuk. We learn from over here that worshiping, what are we saying? That the Yidden might say, they did it, we're going to do it. That's kedarko. That's kedarko. It doesn't matter whether it's respectful or not. But that is the source from where we see that worshiping an idol in any way, if that's the way they did it, Hashem is saying not to do it. Why do we b'chal need this pasuk? Now, here's a chaim. If we're learning the maskana the way we're learning, Zayveach lo Elohim Yechkoram is telling you that the zvicha, which means zvicha, haktora, and nisuch, and also ishtachava, that's exception. If that's something that even though shaloi kedarka yechayiv skila, this pasuk in A is telling you that regarding other avodas, that's kedarka, not these four, you also chayiv skila. It works. But based on the Havamina of Rava bar Rav Chanan, that no, Hishtachava already tells you that any act, even Shaloi Kedarka, if it's respectful, you're chayiv. Why do I need this pasuk Eicha? It means any act you're chayiv, even if it's Shaloi Kedarka. Why do I need to tell a pasuk Kedarka? Eicha yavdu l'mutamai. You would know it anyways. And if you're going to answer, I'll tell you why. Because Hishtachava is respectful. What happens if a person does a disrespectful act to animals that are normally worshipped respectfully? Zoifchem means animals to which you serve them by slaughtering. Slaughtering is called respectful. Poyer means to defecate. By the Baal Pa'oida was kedarkoi. That was because that's kedarkoi. But lema'utei, that if you do something disrespectful, you won't be chayiv, and that's why you have eicha for, because eicha is telling you only if you worship a avodah zarah kedarkoi you're chayiv. It's not needed. That we also know from ishtachava. Why? Ishtachava is a respectful act. I would know it from ishtachava nafke, because I would say on my own, my ishtachava, that you're chayiv. And again, you're chayiv the havamina, even if it's shaloi kedarka, but at least it's derech kavod. And that taka would include any other act, yekedarka, even shaloi kedarka, only derech kavod. So I would know from the hishtachava that if someone does something disrespectful, shaloi kedarka, to an avodah zara, they're not chayiv. Why do we need eicha for? Shouldn't that in itself prove everything switches? Now, guys, nachamol, if based on the maskana there's no kasha, once we say hishtachava is the exception. Zeveach lalahim means avodas pnim. What about other avodas that are not done on the Beis Hamikdash? We don't know that. Then you need the pasuk of eicha. But now, according to the Havamina, why would you need it? So what was even Rava Bar Rav Chanan's Havamina? The Gemara says that's not a kasha. Because I would tell you that without the pasuk eicha, I would have thought, what happens if someone does something disrespectful, shaloi kedarka, to an idol that's also worshipped disrespectfully? And the example will be, like we spoke about the bowling, that Merkulis, the way they worship this is by knocking it down. That's disrespectful. What happens if someone defecates for the Merkulis? See, that's already different. In other words, it's not someone who's poyer atzmai lezoifchim, because those animals are worshipped that are covered. This person, he shouldn't do it, but he's doing something disrespectful, he taka won't be chayiv. If not for eicha, one might have thought that if someone does one disrespectful action to an avodah zara, shaloi kedarka, but its darka is also disrespectful, maybe you would think you're chayiv. That's why eicha yavdu is only if you do it kedarka. That's al kadai techamino hoil vavidosei anyways is bizoyin, which is throwing stones. So maybe any type of service, even if it is shaloi kedarka, you're defecating. So that's why you need the eicha. Says the Gemara, nisht. I still have a problem. on the havamin of Rava Bar Rav Chanan. Ella hoda amar Rabbi. Guys, we're going to go with the Girsa Rabbi Elazar. He asked, minayin l'zevech behema lemerkulis shu chayiv. Another question. Merkulis is worshipped disrespectfully. What happens if someone does zevicha to the Merkulis? Now, zevicha is something respectful. How do you know they're chayiv? Shenemar. Now you can argue, hold on. Why don't we say that zeveach le'elohim yacharam? Any act of zevicha, but maybe since that avodah zara is done shaloi derech kavod, maybe that won't be good. So he has a pasuk in Achri Mois. It's a pasuk that's hard to teach, but the pasuk writes, that we will no longer offer karbanos to demons or to avodah zara. Now, holding on, says Rabbi Elazar, we know that an act of zevicha that's kedarka is also that we know. So, how do I know that? From the pasuk eicha yavdu. So says Rabbi Elazar, Tineu inyan l'shaloi kedarka. Okay, now comes the kasha. In other words, we know that an act of zevicha, even shaloi kedarka, same as pashat kasha. If hishtachava is telling me, havamina, that any respectful act, even shaloi kedarka, like bowing down, is going to be chayiv, then you don't need the pasuk. Shaloi kedarka mishtachava nafka, according to the havamina, according to the havamina, so it's going to become also extra. So you don't need the dasi'irim, according to the Havamina. So the Gemara says, according to the Havamina, I would say you need the pasuk lasi'irim in the unique case, which is what happens if someone worships an idol. Yabakuk, they don't believe in the idol. They know that God doesn't like it, and God forbid they want to get God angry. It's like a little child, they want to get their father angry. Without the lasi'irim, you would have thought you're not chayiv misa. Because you're not doing an avodah zara, you're just getting God angry. That's the pasuk. That's why you would still need the pasuk in Achri Mois v'lo yizbechu oides of chaim lasi'irim. Even here you chayav misa. So what we find answered is why there was a havamina. But the bottom line is that the maskana is the four avodas that the Mishnah mentioned: zevicha, haktara, chevra nisuch, and ishtachava. Whether it's kedarka, shaloi kedarka, yechayiv skila. Remember, any other action, even a disrespectful action, if it's kedarka, yechayiv misa. Hapoyer lebal poer, hazoyrek even lemarkulis. But an action that's respectful, but the goyim don't worship the idol with that respectful act, even though yechayiv lav, betarnished, and they're malkis, but there's no chiyuv misas beis, and there's no chiyuv skill. Okay, now naya, new topic. Says the Gemara Rav Amnuna, irkus elei toira. Rabbi Nuna lost his oxen, and therefore he went to look for it. So, Bekitza Yidden, you're looking for your oxen, you're doing business. When I meet you, when you meet me in the marketplace, the hashgacha pratis of him losing his oxen was not for him to go looking for his oxen, but the Rabba had a psak kasher. So now Rabba saw him, Amachaye, Pogabei Rabba. And what's in between the lines? He didn't tell Rabba, not now, I'm looking for my oxen. Could be he lost the oxen for good. By the time they finished this whole machlekes over here, so Rabba chaptarain, he sees Rav Hamnuna. So Rabba asked Rav Hamnuna, we spoke out in the intro, and I'll tell you the whole thing by heart. This goes until the middle of Samach Aleph Amud Beis. Our Mishnah spoke about ha'oived avodas kechavim. Meaning, from when you chayiv misa, from when you did, not you, chas v'shalom, from when a person did avodah zarah, they did the action, whatever it was. Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis. Now, Daf Samach Zayin Amud Beis is speaking about the mesis and the nisos. It's just a scenario of avodah zarah. There's an instigator. The instigator, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven tells Shimon, why don't you worship idols? So, when Shimon responds, I'll do it, he's already chayiv misa. Is the chanaya that not only when you do the action, even when you say you'll do the action. That's the stira. Is it doing it or is it saying you're going to do it? That Tanan is our Mishnah Samach Amud Beis. Ha'oived. You see, you did it. Ha'oived, meaning oivedin, but only oimer. No one is suggesting that you should make such a statement, but just by saying you're not chayiv misa yet, you didn't do it yet, which by the way fits the normal rules. When it comes to other avedas, machshava ra'a ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitztaref la'maisa. But nevertheless, it says v'hanan tanan. This is a Mishnah on Daf Samach Zayin. Ha'omer evoid. Ha'omer evoid is where the maces is speaking about an idol that's right there. So he says, I'm going to do it. Or, I'm going to go and do it. I'm just explaining why I'm going to go and do it, because that's a scenario where the avodah zarah is far away. I'm going to go. Or, the maces spoke to many people. And many people responded in the plural. We will go. Neilech v'navoid. The Mishnah there says that statement chayv skila. Simple question. So that's the kasha Rava asked Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna forgot about his oxen altogether, and now we begin. Amalei. Answer number one responds Rav Hamnuna to Rabba that the case over here, really for just saying you're chayav misa. Over here is einoi mekablei alai elabavoidi. He says, if a person says, I'm going to worship the idol, but I'm only going to consider it a getchke when I do the avodah. Then, before they do the avodah, they're not chayiv misa. Mashenken and Daf Samach Zayin, but oimer means he already was makabel that thing, Yoshka Pandrik, he's chayiv misa right away. Okay, that's his answer. Now, Rabbi Yosef B'chal didn't like the kasha, because it's very common, Shmuel, you have a Mishnah here, you have a Mishnah there. Mishnahs don't have to fit. Every Mishnah can be authored by another Tana. Right, B'chal, like, Rashi Tosfos. When you have a Rashi, Stira, and Rashi, you got a problem, because it's the same Rashi. Tosfos is never a Stira. Tosfos here, Tosfos there was so many Bala Tosfos. In other words, Rabbi Yosef Omar, I don't understand. Tanoi shokalt ma'alma. You're chopping, you're picking Mishnahs and you're saying, it's a stira. Of course, it's a machloikas tanoim, tanoyehi. The Tanya, and he's linking it to the following machloikas that we have in the Braisa. Ha'omer bo'u v'ivduni. This is a unique case. There's a mesis, but Shmuel, the mesis, the instigator, is not saying go serve Yashke. The mesis is saying go serve me. Ich bin the deity. Rav Meir says, now here, guys, don't get confused. Here we're not speaking about the worshipper, the nisos. Here we're focusing, the mesis is also chayiv misa. Rav Meir says he's chayiv, the mesis is chayiv right away, because he instigated. Rabbi Yehuda says he's potter. Now, we're going to see later, this is unique. There's unique because he's asking the person to worship him. It's less probable that he'll be worshipped. Who's he? But we're going to put that aside. Without making that nafkamina, it's about unique because he says, go worship me. The Gemara wants to say, what's the machloikas over there? So first of all, clarifies Rabbi Yosef, Eicha the palchu, if the nisas taka worship the mesis. Kuli alma loy pliga, that the mesis is chayiv. And listen to this drasha, because it says, loisasa locha pesel. So how is he teaching Rabbi Yosef? Mach sich nicht var a pesel. You don't become a pesel. Once the Nisos worshipped him, he became a pesel, he's chayiv misa. Ki pliga is b'dibura ba'alma. B'dibura ba'alma means the Nisos didn't do anything yet. The Nisos didn't do anything yet. Elomasu, why should the Maces be chayiv? Because he spoke words. Rav Meir holds dibura milsehi. That's why chayiv misa, the Maces. Rabbi Yehuda Sover dibura lav milsehi. You understand, guys? So now let's put it together. So now it fits over here. Rabbi Yehuda holds dibura lav milsehi. That's Samach Hamed Beis. If dibura lav milsehi on the Maces, so dibura lav milsehi by the Nisas. You only chayiv misa when you do it. The Mishnah Daf Samach Zayin is going to hold dibura milsa. Will be like Rav Meir.
The Mishnah here, if there is a Maces and Nisas did the avodah, the Maces then yes chayiv.
That's for sure. L'kol alma. The Baraisa is where he says, "Come and worship me," and we'll see there's something unique about that. The Mishnah here is speaking about the oived, not the Maces.
But he's chayiv if the Nisas were.
He's going to be chayiv. We'll see in a moment. If a Maces tells a person, "Go worship another idol," in many cases he'll be chayiv misa right away. And that's the point. Hadar Amarav Yosef Lav Milsehi da Amri. What I said is wrong. Really, Dafila Rabbi Yehuda B'diburinam Chiyuv Mechayev. Mamish, your question, Shlomo. It's even Rabbi Yehuda's Moedim. Not in the case that we just learned. Not come and worship me. If a Maces says go worship that, even Rabbi Yehuda says the Maces is chayev. The Tanya it's really a brayse. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo olam and chayev achi yomer evoid or elach ve'evoid nelach ve'navoid. Clearly, you see, right, that words clearly, Claude, words is machayev misa, and therefore words is machayev misa by a Maces also. Here is different. The machlokes here, before we come back to the state in the Mishnayos, the machlokes when a guy says, "Come worship me," but Michael Mifligi, the Maces la'atzmai, and the other person even said yes. Nevertheless, there's a machlokes. It's a machlokes whether that's considered a significant instigation. It's taka different. Go worship someone else or go worship me. Marsover, that's Rav Meir. Maces la'atzmai, even if a person is instigating that he should be the subject of idol worship, shamilei. The Nisos can obey him. Guys, it's hard to relate to it because we don't have a taiva. They had a taiva to that. To worship. Yeah. So you instigate, like we are, wherever our taiva is, don't go there, because we know that if I have a yetzer hara towards something, once it's instigated, there comes a point, a person is going to fall. And he says which is why Rab Meir is mechayev. Rabbi Yehuda unique in that case. When a guy says worship me, Maces la'atzmai, there is loishamalei. That is where the Nisos won't listen. Why? Because Meimir Amri, the Nisos tells himself, he's different than me. He's a getchke. He's just like me. It's a joke.
Is it someone?
What's I was saying? And he said, even though he said yes, Shmueli ve'in the comedy. Sometimes people say yes, halachically, they're laughing at you. Like, don't bother me. Yeah. Ve'in, the comedy So, Bekitzer, first of all, Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda that you quoted has no relation to our question. For whatever reason, he rejected the answer of Rav Hamnuna. Right, what did Rav Hamnuna answer? Rav Hamnuna answered that our Mishnah is when he says, I'm not makabelit. If he would say, I'm makabelit, he would be chayev skila even before he worshipped it. When someone is instigating, and a guy says, yeah, I'm going to go over there. The Nisos is also chayev misa. But Rabbi Yosef rejected that. So here, before we go on, Shmueli, what did you want to say?
Oh, it's like, is that like when a person says worship me, is that like, what if the person's like more powerful or like more important than the other person?
All these nuances could be enough kamina. Here we're not going to focus on it yet. Okay. So Mas Nisan, the way Rabbi Yosef is going to reconcile this tiram. Again, what happened to Rav Hamnuna with the oxen, I have no idea. I'm telling you, that was gone. Kan, I guess, Kan means here and Samach Zayin. You have to know how to halt up here. And Daf Samach Zayin, you're chayiv even by just saying, that's biyachid. Look at the psychology. Biyachid hanisos. Kan, meaning on Daf Samach, you only chayiv misa when you do the idol worship is if there is a rabbim that are saying they're going to do it. But rabbim hanisosim, and he explains it. Yochid, loy mimlach. A yochid will not reconsider. Psychology. Sometimes it's the opposite. He holds that way. In other words, a person makes a commitment, maybe dafka because they are alone. They know, I don't have anyone to support me. I'm by myself. So when I'm committed, I'm going to do it. And therefore, v'toy basrei, he's going to go after it. So therefore, he's chayiv misa. Rabim, when a group makes a commitment, groups should be considered. Rabim mimlechi, therefore, it could be, and hopefully, uloi to basrei, and therefore, when are they chayiv misa? Only when they worship. Amar Rav Yosef, no, I mean Allah. How do I know that? Because in Parshas Re'eh, when it says regarding idol worship, the Torah says regarding in the Meses, in the Parsha of Meses and Nisos, Lo yisoiveloi, the Torah says, don't accede to him. Lo yisishma elav, don't hearken to him. In other words, the point is, don't listen means is that the chiyuv doesn't come only because he made a declaration. It's because he's listening. It's about the level of buying into it. That's his diuk. Ha'ava v'shama, if he bought into it, he's chayiv. Taka, even though he didn't worship. And this psychology that a rabbim, when a rabbim makes a commitment, they don't buy into it until they do it. The Gemara is going to give a counter logic. Says the Gemara, Eisvei Abaya, this is classical to Rav Yosef. Mishani be'nisas rabbim le'nisas yachid. I don't think there's such a difference. And this is not instigated by a rabbim, guys. We're speaking about the nisas. Whether a yachid was nisas or whether a rabbim is nisas. And I'll prove to you that there is no difference. Ve'hatanya, another quotation from Parshas Re'eh in this whole parsha of a instigator and an instigated. When you who's Beni Mecha, we have the whole Rashi there. Why dafke Beni Mecha? But anyways, over here, so in B'chlal Lashon HaKodesh, guys, this is the rule. In English, right, you can mean you to a Yachid. You can mean you to a Rabbim. In this pasuk, Ki Yisischa, the Braisa says it means both. Echad Yachid Hanisos ve'echad Rabbim Hanisosim. So it's the parsha begins by dafke not differentiating. It's about both cases. Where an instigator is speaking to one, where an instigator is speaking to many. And v'hoitzi, now another detail says this Braisa, let me just say it out by heart, there's a youth phenomena that happens that if there was an act of instigation to a rabbim, what happens if the rabbim taka served avodah zarah? That's called the irani dachas. So something very unusual happens. Just to know that as we're learning in this Pedic Arba Misos, we do put in we give a hierarchy to what's considered a more chamur dika death, biyad bezdin, and what's considered less. Sometimes there's a machlokes tanoim. But between skila and sayif, l'kula alma. Skila is more chamur, sayif is more kal. For the sin of, God forbid, idol worship, we know that's what we're learning now. We're in the topic of skila. But you know what? The moment the roiv of the city becomes oiv de avodah zarah, God forbid, that's a din of nidachas. Even though there is a misa, it becomes more kal, saif. But on the other hand, when a person serves idols, he gets punished, but his property is not taken away. When the irani dachas gets involved in avodah zarah, the Torah writes the livestock is killed, right? All of the inanimate items, they're burnt. The kitzur, he'll lose all of your property. So the Braisa says, even though the parsha begins with an instigator to both a yachid and a rabbim, but there is a difference whether he instigated a yachid or a rabbim, which is yachid michlal rabbim lahachman al gufay. If there's only a yachid, and so then the din is a yachid who worships avodah zarah, like we said, gets skila. So there's a chumrah. But on the other hand, there's no penalty given. There's nothing that's done to this oived avodah zarah's property. When there is a rabbim, mechlal yachid, which is lahakal al guf, and mitzad echad, everyone gets killed, so to say, only besayif. It's considered kuladik. Ulahachman al mamoinam. End of quote. Point is that only b'hamil sahu deshani, ava b'chol mini ki adadinino. So you, Rav Yosef, you're trying to make this differentiation that when the nisos only verbally commits, there is a nafkamina. Why wouldn't the Braisa mention it? The Braisa mentioned the only difference between Yachid and Rabbim. Lahakal al gufam, lahakal al lamoinam, which either way. So therefore, he doesn't accept this way of reconciling the Mishnayos. Abaye has another answer. Elamar Abaye, kan here means on Daf Samach, is benisois bifnei atzmai. Like we said, our Mishnah doesn't speak about meses. The Mishnah began, we learned yesterday, when you went on your own. If a person goes on their own, there's no one instigating them. You know when the Chayiv Misa? When they did it. If they didn't do it, it's a machshavara. Machshavara, ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah l'maisa. Daf Samach Zayin is speaking about a scenario where the person didn't on his own say, I'm going to worship. There was a meses. It's different. Then he's chayiv even for saying, Kan b'nisas b'pnei achedim. And he explains this type of psychology, explains further Abaya, mipi atzmai, if a person in their minds, they make a hachlata, it's shayach, mimlach, they'll reconsider. And therefore, they're only going to be chayiv when they do it. But mipi achedim, gorer basrayu. The opposite logic, and I can say like this, that if everyone is different. I relate to Abaya. Makes a big, it's easy for me to chap this. Okay, weiter. Amar Abaye and Mino law. Again, I'll prove it to you because since it says in the parsha of Meses, Loi soiva loi, don't listen to him, don't accede to him, don't hearken to him. Again, from there you can be medayik that if you only listened, you're already going to be chayiv. No, it's only making the declaration fits, but it fits the parsha in the A of Meses. If there is no Meses, you're only chayiv for action. Rava gives another answer. Even our Mishnah can be speaking about Achedim. First of all, Rava is not denying that our Mishnah can also be Mepei Atzmai. But even Mepei Achedim, so look at this. This has to do with marketing. How strong was the instigation from the instigator? If the instigator says, go worship an idol, he didn't explain why. Then the Nisas, even though the Nisas, God forbid, says, yeah, he's not going to be chayv until he does it. But if the Meses says, if you're going to worship an idol, things will be good for you, he'll sell it, he'll market it. The more he markets it, the more there is a chance that the Nisos will do it, so he's going to be chayv right away. It's the last narrow line. Guys, means daf samach zayin, you're chayv only for the commitment. The Amalek, that's when the Meses told the Nisos, first he's explaining how to worship the idol. The idol likes this food, the idol likes this liquids. And you know what happens to you if you do it? He tells them the Meses, kach meitiva, kach meiria. He can make it good for you, he can make it bad for you. In other words, since the Meses explain the benefits of the avodah, there's a higher chance that the Nisos will do it after he made the commitment. He's chayv misa right away. Our Mishnah daf samach he didn't explain the benefits. He just told him, go worship idols. And the person, God forbid, said, yeah. Oh wait, that yeah is not machayev anything yet. And Amar Rav Amin Allah, that what? That marketing something will affect the halachic outcome of committing to that which was properly marketed to you, because it says all in the parish over there of Meses in the A, that when you're going to see, when you're going to ask to yourselves that Melohei ha'amim asher sviv oisechem hakrevim elecha oy harachoikim mimeka, right? You're going to say, how did they worship it? We just quoted this pasuk and the person is going to say ve'esa chen gamoni, God forbid. Oh, so why did the Torah B'chlal have to speak about idols that are close or far? Mali krevim, mali rechoik. It must be hachi ka'amrulei. This is what the Meses is saying, that mitivusam shal krevim atolamed al tivusam shal rechoikim. This is what the Eibusher, there's a statement that Chazal say, haroitze l'shaker yarche kedusa. It's a good klal in life. When people want to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge, if it's not emes, they're going to speak about something that's far away because you cannot verify it. That's now the Meses is saying, I want you to worship the idol over there. They make it sound exotic. Ooh, the goyim over there, and by the Buddha, by the Far East. Wow, they make it sound like who knows what. Why don't they try to sell you Yashka Pandrik? Because the ones that are near, that it's garnished. So they try to sell you something that's far away. So the Torah is already being maramas. You should know that why should the ones far away be anything more effect than the ones over here? And that just like the ones over here are garnished, the ones over there are nothing. In other words, my love, why is all that needed? Because the Meses is selling the whole thing. he's being masbir, you'll worship that idol over there, they do it that way, and it's going to be good for you. My love, the Armalei, Kach Echeles, Kach Shoyse, Kach Metiva, Kach Meria, indeed, Shema Mina. Parshas Re'eh, Parshas Maces is when the Maces is giving a whole marketing. And over there, if the Nisas responds, Eilech ve'evoid chayev misa. Mishnah Daf Samach Zayin. Over here, even if there's a Maces, if he doesn't sell it properly, you only chayev misa when you do the service. Rav Ashi Yomar, I'll give you another explanation. You know why the Samach Zayin you're chayev misa for saying? It's speaking about a Yid that already worshipped idols in the past. So we know that he already did it. Now, why wasn't he killed until now? Because there wasn't Asra until now. So when a Yisrael is a Mumar, logical, then if he only just says, I'm going to do it, he's Chayiv Misa already. Because he already did it. If someone, Daf Samach, he never worshipped idols before. There, you only Chayiv Misa when you did it. Gavaldik. And the final answer, Ravina Omar, B'chlal, who told you it's a stira? It's called Loi Zu Av Zu Ktani. I hope I said it good in the intro. Loi Zu Av Zu, it's common that Rabbeinu HaKadosh begins min akal el akovid. In other words, he begins the sugya of Avodah Zarah, Daf Samach. If you worship idols, the Mishnah agrees that even if he only said, he's also chayiv. But you introduce a topic and then you say, you know what? Not only if you worship idols, even if you only say Eilech ve'evoid, you're also going to be chayiv. B'chlal, there's no stira. Gavaldik. Okay, now we're starting the new topic that will go into Samach Beis. Now there's very foundational differences between the Rishonim how to learn this. We're going to learn Shitas Rashi. Listen to this topic. Itmer. Ha'oivid avoidis kichave ma'avo me'yira. If a person worships idol from love or fear, says Rashi, from love of another person, which means they're not moided that idol has any divinity in it. Reuven loves Shimon. Shimon Nebach is an eingefallen and Avodah Zarah, was a big taiva. Shimon is telling Reuven to worship. Or even if he didn't say it, Reuven is worshiping the idol because he loves Shimon. Or Yira, that Reuven is afraid of Shimon. He doesn't believe in the idol, he's only worshiping the idol because he's afraid. Now this is problematic because as we spoke on Bekitzur, the three Avedas for which a Yid has to give his life, one of them is Avodah Zarah. That's Yira. What's Yira mean? Shimon tells Reuven, if you're not going to worship idols, I'm going to kill you. So Koidim called that Ramam Taka Paskins, that even though Yaharoig, right, Yehorig va'al Yavoir, but the Ramam writes, but if a person couldn't be Omed bin Asoyin, and they worship the idol, Miyira, the Ramam writes, they're not going to be Chayiv Misa.
Maybe the intention is not there?
No, not maybe, because the intention is not, that's the topic here. The intention is not there. Hold on. To make the sugi simpler, the way they explain Bishitas Rashi, Yira doesn't mean of death. We're not speaking about fear of death. Yira means what happens if a person is afraid of bodily harm or of financial loss. That's also called Yira. The point is, Bidiyuk, the way Rashi learns, he's not Mekabel deity. That means there's no intention. He's not worshipping the idol because he believes in the idol. He's only doing it, he's doing an external act because of love of another person or because of fear of another person. What's the din? Machloikes Abaye and Rava. Abaye says chayev, Rava says pat. And guys, just good to remember from the beginning, a klal, that whenever Machloikes Abaye and Rava, right, halacha, kerava, chutz, mi yalkegam. This is not the yalkegam cases, but here we have a Machloikes Abaye and Rava. Abaye says chayev, dohapolcha, he worshipped. Rava says patur. What's the point? Listen, it fits. If when he did the act, he was makabel, he accepted that thing has some sort of divine power, then takiya chayv misa, chayv skila, ben noyach, chayv asayif. But Eloi, how important is intent when it comes to idol worship? That's the machloikas Abaye and Rava. And now a siman for the subsequent sugya will be Eved Yishtachav el Mashiach. Gavaldik. Sometimes the mnemonics are harder to remember. This is so easy. And Eved, bowing down, is an act of bittul. And Eved will bow. We all should be avadim that will bow down to Mashiach. Amen. So let's go. Amen. Abaye. The first one is from the Eved, Allah. How do I know that you're chayiv? Zokt Abaye from our Mishnah, Ditnan, Daf Samach Amud Beis. It says in our Mishnah, Remember the kasha we asked yesterday? So the Mishnah then began to specify. The Mishnah says, Echad ha'ovid, ve'echad ha'mizabeach, ve'echad ha'makater, ve'echad ha'menasech. And the Gemara asked in the beginning, what's the Echad ha'ovid? Now we have the answer of Rabbi Yirmiyah, but Abaya is not accepting the answer of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Why the word ovid is extra? Klal uprat. The Mishnah began, ha'ovid avodas kechavim, klal. When you're being mefaret, the first prat is mizabeach. What's this ha'ovid? And my love, l'chura, that's Abaya's raya. The ha'ovid means that even if you were only ovid me'ava or me'ira, you're chayav skila. So that's a raya to Abaya. But it's not a kash on Rava, because Rava Amarlach, no, that's not pshat. We just learned it yesterday. Kedemetaretz Rabbi Yirmiyah. That ha'ovid means if a person did an avoida that's kedarka to any idol, the chayiv skila. Kedarka. If a person does something shaloi kedarka, then they're not going to be chayiv skila aside of the four. That's the whole sugya that we're learning. Then the Mishnah. The ha'ovid means kedarka no matter what. That's the ha'ovid. But it has to be l'shem elokah, mekabel elokah. Eloha, to correct myself. We only make the hay into a kaf if it's, we're speaking about the God with the big G, the capital G. Amar Abaye, another Raya, that's the second of the Namanik, the Tanya, when it says in the Aseres HaDibros, Lois ishtachav Elohem, Zok de Braisa, Elohem yatem ishtachva. You are allowed to bow down to a person like you, meaning, this is important, that bowing down to a person as an act of respect is mamash muter. Verstehst? Because, how do we know that? Because it says lohem. You might think, now guys, Haman thought, he deferred to himself as a getchke. Would that be allowed? No. Talmud loimer. No. If the person is claiming to be a deity, then even bowing down to a person is asur. Loisa avdei. End of Braisa. Now says the Gemara, Haman miyira hava neva. The Torah writes befedish. The Torah means ksuvim. Over there in the Megillah, it says that everyone would bow down. Why? Because the king commanded so. It says so befedish. In other words, l'chu'ura, that's a raya that even though everyone bowed down to Haman, and the Braisa is saying that bowing down to Haman is not okay. Not because they accepted Haman as a god. They only did it out of fear of the king. Still, that's something that you're not allowed to do. That's a Gavaldik Raya to Abaya. So Rava says, no. The Braisa doesn't mean mamish like the case of Haman. Kahaman, but v'loi kahaman. The Haman, the Iyo Gufei, Avaris Kechavim. No, it's when are you chayv to bow down? When the Haman said he's a god, and the person bowing down is doing it as a god. In other words, the Braisa says like this: bowing down to a person out of respect is okay. Bowing down to the person thinking he's a getchke, that's asur. Actually, in the case of Haman, according to Rava, even though Haman says he was a deity, if a person would have bowed down to Haman, this is according. One second. If a person would have bowed down to Haman, not because Haman is a deity, but only because he would not be chayiv. It's the Braisa's lat meira, but if it's meira, you put. Now hold on. In other words, Rav is really saying that if anyone would bow down to Haman, since the bower, the ovid, is only doing it from yira of the king Achashverosh, he would be pater. That's a problem. So why didn't Mordechai bow down? That's the kash. And don't forget, we paskin like Rava. So look inside the Tosfos, the one Tosfos, 7 lines from the bottom. 7 lines from the bottom. Zok Tosfos vim toimer li Rava. Indeed, amai lo yishtachva Mordechai lo Haman. That's mamish the case of ha'ovid, even though Haman was claiming that he is a zagot, a getchke, but that was not Mordechai's intent. So v'yesh loimer keda amar b'medrish shehoyu tzalamim al liboy. Ad hayoim hazeh, the goyim go with the cross on a necklace. That's it. In other words, they don't know where it comes from. There's so much into avodah zarah. People bow down as respect. People do it, and that's okay. When we meet each other, you can do that. But what Haman did was he put an avodah zarah on his chest, aliboy. So that's why Mordechai couldn't bow down. Or Tosfos writes, Inami Mishum Kiddush Hashem, which is a huge topic. In other words, it was unique. Me'ikar adin, Mordechai could have bowed down to Haman. Look, Lirava. Even though Haman was claiming he's a Getchke, but he was only doing it Meyiras HaMelech. But there's a Kiddush Hashem aspect when a Jew doesn't bow down. It's a mighty dicker thing. There was the Rabbi Rashi from Mexico, whose name I forgot of blessed memory. He went to Iran during the Iran hostages in 79, and there were Yidden amongst the Americans that were taken hostage. And the story is that they were all of the people that the Iranian government allowed in to be there for the Jewish soul, for the clergy, to be there for the hostages. They were invited to a prayer. Khomeini was by that prayer. That means there were hundreds of thousands of goyim there. They all bowed down. The only person that didn't bow down was this Rav from Mexico, the koyach of a person. And he says he stood up. He says a few seconds later, security people took him. And they brought him to Khomeini. And Khomeini asked him, why didn't you bow down? So he told him that I'm a Jew and I only bow down to God. And being that I don't understand the language, I don't know what is being bowed down to, I didn't bow down. And Khomeini was so impressed by that. You know, the koyach to be in such a country at that time. So that is what Taka helped him later when he wanted to bring to them a menorah to light, and he spoke to them about the Eden. It had a big positive effect, the koyach of a person. Okay. Let's go to the last one. Let's see how far we can get. That if you are oivid, now here we need to give a few words of very important introduction. When you can open up a Chumash and Pashas Vayikra, you're going to see when it comes to a carbon chatos, which is basically brought for violating a negative commandment, for which you would be chayv kados if you did it b'mezid, b'shoigig chayv carbon chatos. Not everyone brings exactly the same type of carbon. So the Torah speaks about the nasi, has his unique carbon. The Torah speaks about a kohen gadol, which is called here the kohen Moshiach. And by the way, during this man Bayesheni, when the kohen only became a kohen gadol because he wore the meruma begadim, he was not included in this parsha. Now, what's important is that there's something unique about the carbon Mashiach, and that we'll learn in Hoidius. That when does the Kohen Mashiach bring a different type of carbon chatos? Not stam when he does a shoygig. When he was a scholar, he was learned, and he beto'us erroneously misunderstood the halach. That's called helam davar. It means he learned wrong pshat, and therefore he acted wrong. However, in Parsha Shlachgar, there's a whole Parsha also about this Helam Davar. How sometimes if the Sanhedrin makes a mistake concerning Avodah Zarah, that there is a carbon upon the Sanhedrin, how the Moshiach, Kohen Moshiach has to bring a carbon concerning Avodah Zarah. So says the Braisa, Kohen Moshiach by Avodas Kachavim, Rebbe holds is unique. Rebbe holds that by Avodah Zarah, the Kohen Moshiach is like any other Yid. What triggers the unique Kohen Moshiach's chatos only shigagas maisa. You don't need to have that. He has to learn wrong pshat in a din. You don't need helam davar. The chachamim hold, like in all cases, helam davar. Now the Braisa says v'shavin that whatever triggers, if he has to bring, when he has to bring a carbon for avodah zarah, he brings a seira, which would mean that the Kohen Moshiach will have to bring a female goat like any other commoner kiyachid, and also v'shavin she'ein mevi asham talui. So here's the rule: by a commoner, a sin for which you're being al carbon chatos, eating chaylev b'shoigig, if there is a doubt whether I ate chaylev or not, when it's chazik yisura, asham talui. And lekula alma, a kohen Mashiach never brings an asham talui. Question is, what about by avodah zarah? So even l'shitas Rebbe that holds that a kohen Mashiach ba'avodas kichavim is like every other Jew, only for shigagas ma'isa do you bring a chatos, but he will never bring an asham talui. And now I know it's late. Let's chapanayin, which means shigagas ma'isa ba'avodas kichavim echadami. How is it shayach l'Rebbe? Not what's shigagas ma'isa by avodah zarah? And guys, I know it's late, but every line is gold here. And we're going to have this repeated a few times in Daf Samach. If it means a person went into a Beis HaKnesses, Beis HaKnesses means he went into a Beis HaKnesses to Avodah Zarah. And he bowed down. But he thought it's for God. He Pasha didn't know. And really it was an Avodah Vishtach V'loi. That, of course, Harei Liboy La Shamayim. In other words, Rashi writes, look inside Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom. Not only is he not amazed, it's not even called a shoygig. He taka bow down to God. And the Bachlal, Rashi writes, when a person is in a building, they don't bow down to the building, even the goyim. They're bowing down to their getchke. So it's garnished. Back in the Gemara. Ella, maybe the Chazal on Darta, that he saw a statue. Now, there were statues that were kings. Bowing down to a statue of a king is not ideal, but it's not bona fide avodah zarah. And he bowed down to it. So here again, if he was mekabelit as Elohim, that's called mezit. Daf samach beis. If he was not mekabelit Elohim, again, laf klumu. And that's the whole parsha also by Hanani, Mishael, Azariah. They didn't bow down to the statue of the king. That was like Toysvus. That was beyond. Elo lav l'chu'ura. That what happens. The shoygig is that he bowed down, knowing that he's bowing down to an avodah zarah, without any intention, right? He only did it out of love and fear for another person. That's called shigigas maisa. Shigas Maisa means, according to Abai, because you're taka chayiv. He thought you're not chayiv. The chayre, that's the case. And the Rava says, no, that the case of, it means he thought it's bechlal not a problem to bow down to Avodah Zarah. He didn't know, as I'm Metzias, that there's any problem with Avodah Zarah. So it says the Gemara, Oimer Mutter, isn't that a wrong psak din? So the Gemara says, but Oimer Mutter legamri is not called a wrong psak din. Helam davar is kiyo mixas or bitol mixas. We'll learn this in Hoydias. This is important. This din of Hoydu Bezdin or Kohen Moshiach, that they made a mistake in a detail and then they did the sin, is not if they made a amaratzas dika mistake. Like here, he b'chlal didn't know you can't worship idols. The whole parsha of Helam davar means he knows that you can't eat chaylev, but the Bezdin or the Kohen Moshiach, so this detail is not shaykh. Chaylev is not up for that. Hoimer Mutter is not called Helam Davar. That's the case of Shigas Maisa. So this does not refute Rava, God willing to be continued.